We are here back in Edmonton, Alberta, for another Score and Compass podcast episode. This time, not with a Mason, but with somebody who had involvement with the Masonic Lodge recently, which I was lucky enough to take part in. And I thought it was something really cool. And I want to have him on the podcast to talk not only about that involvement, but also his Edmonton Brewing, his company he's just started, and kind of the connection there, and also just about his passion for brewing alcohol, for brewing beer in particular. Can you brew alcohol, or is it just like
it's distilling? It's similar-ish process, but it's a distilling. So it's not brewing; it's distilling.
Distillery, perfect. All right. So Jason Gold, thank you so much for being here.
Well, thanks, Cam. I appreciate coming on.
So before, I guess, the reason I'm having you on is I discovered through my contacts the Edmonton Lodge virtual beer and cheese night, which I thought was, and beer, cheese, and meat night, I should say, which was a blast. I really loved attending it. And I thought it was just a really interesting idea and a really interesting event that both Masonic lodges, but also any group that's kind of being forced to meet virtually right now, can engage in, because I know there's a big push in Masonic circles to find ways to keep membership engaged while we're meeting virtually, while we're not able to meet in person. So can you talk a bit about kind of on your end, setting up that night, what that night was, and how you went about working with Edmonton Lodge?
So basically what happened is one of the honorable members was he reached out to me saying, "Hey, I want to do a wine and cheese, but guys typically don't like wine; they prefer beer. Well, is there something that you can do with your new brewery to make this happen?" So I talked with, is he the junior or the senior warden there? I don't know. Mike Toffler.
It's junior warden.
Junior warden, yeah. So I was talking with him about things, and I said, yeah, absolutely. A lot of people think that wine and cheese they pair very well, but a lot of people don't realize that there's so many, a million different types of beer out there, and they can easily be paired with different meats, different cheeses, different things, the same way a sommelier would do it. So I said, absolutely, let's put together an event, and I can choose some beers that and some pairings of some charcuterie and cheese that will pair off extremely well with them, and go forward.
And one thing to mention is, like for myself, this is a bit out of my wheelhouse because I don't drink myself. I was enjoying Virgin Caesars during the night, but I still found it just really interesting to learn about the distilling process, how the different meats pair with the different cheeses, pair with the beer. It's something that even if you don't drink yourself, it's still an enjoyable night, because it's, getting a chance to learn, getting a chance to hear about somebody who's passionate about something, explain the process, right? That's a really cool thing. And that came through in your presentation. It was clear that you cared about the distilling process and pairing these things. So it was a lot of fun, even for somebody who doesn't drink beer necessarily.
Yeah, right. Like, it's, for me, I've been a fan of beer for forever. I've probably had a total of 2 bottles of wine in my entire life, complete from start to end, right? So for 20 plus years of eligible to drink by law, I've had 2 bottles of wine total, and I've probably drank 1,000 kegs worth of beer, right? Different styles. So, for me, I much prefer the taste of beer, the flavors, the styles of it, when it comes to alcoholic beverages. And a lot of people are scared of it. They're like, "Oh, it's too bitter. It's hoppy. It's I just don't like the flavors." But there's a flavor of beer for everyone, right? It doesn't matter who you are. There's something within beer and the process of it that you're going to like, right? If you don't like bitter beers, well, what about a fruit? If you don't like fruity stuff, what about a crisp, clean something, right? So there's 1,000 different types of beers out there for you to try. And my goal is to try each and every one of them, right?
The what you talked about there, that's something I really enjoyed during the virtual beer tasting event. You talked about kind of the different flavors and the process that goes into creating those different flavors at the distilling process, and deciding on the type of hops and ingredients. It really is such an interesting combination, the distilling process, between kind of science and art. There's a science aspect to it, and there's kind of the art of crafting these flavors. Can you talk a little bit about that? Just how much of your work is trial and error? How much of it is a science? How much of it is an art? Kind of how do you put your own spin on flavors and creating different flavors?
So with that, it's a science-backed art, right? So I there's science in everything. The temperatures that you brew at, the how long you leave it in. Well, what type of chemical compounds do you take out of either the grains, the hops, the fruits, whatever you might add to the beer. The strains of the yeasts will change. So there's a ton of organic chemistry involved with it. But at the end of the day, it's also creativity on, well, what happens if I add, I don't know, black cherry to some chocolate flavored malts, to this, to that, right? What kind of flavor profiles are you going to get out of that, right? So how does that all come together? And that's where the creativity and the fun comes out of it, is the art around it. The science is back there to make sure that the brews are consistent and the flavor is the same from one batch to the next to the next. You got to know the science around that, but the art is on how you combine essentially 4 ingredients, malt, water, sugar, or malt, water, hops, and yeast. Those are the 4 ingredients in beer essentially, and how you combine those 4 ingredients in multiple different ways and methods will do to get you a completely different beer, right? I can use the exact same grains, exact same yeast strain, and the same hop strand, and if I change the water and add some salts to it, or different things within it, different minerals, it changes the profile from a super sweet beer to an extremely bitter beer that has no that's got an off-putting taste just by adding salt to the water, right? So it's amazing what you can do with 4 ingredients and create 1,000 different types of beer.
Now, going back to kind of what you were talking about at the start, you mentioned that you in terms of alcohol, or just in terms of something you love, it's beer, and you love the flavors, and your goal is to try every beer. So I wish you best of luck along that goal. But
I'll never get there, but
it's good to shoot for the stars. It's good to shoot for the stars. I guess, what was the impetus behind? Because that's something I admire when anybody does it, is taking something that you love and then trying to go from the thing you love to turning it into a profession or a career or a business. Edmonton Brewing. What was the impetus to take that next step, and how has it been going?
So, COVID. Everything kind of revolves around COVID the last year and a bit. So I was let go from my original sales job in March of last year. I was doing some outside sales for some trade supplies, and during about 4 or 5 months before that, I was going to a local brewery here in town quite regularly. A friend of mine was running the tap room, and I saw how horribly ran it was. Right, I've got a lot of operations and a lot of management experience, and I just saw that this brewery was just ran poorly, so to speak. There was multiple things I could have done within it to make it operational, or better operational, and more profitable. So I started creating a business plan for it. Once that business plan was created, I spent 2-3 months creating a business plan. I went to that brewery and asked, hey, can I want to buy the brewery because I feel I can make it way more streamlined and way more efficient and way more profitable. And the numbers that he came back with were unrealistic. Let's just put it that way. So I'd already started the business plan. So I said, why not start brewing some beer? So here in Alberta, we're allowed to do what's called a liquor agency, which is basically a contract brewer. So I would go to the other breweries in Alberta because we've got a pretty strong, well-knit group of craft breweries in town and across the province, and said, hey, can you brew some beer for me? And they said, yeah, sure. And created the recipe, we brewed it and put it out on the market. So that's how everything, the history of Edmonton Brewing and Malting started. So there's some deeper dive into that if you want to go in, but that's the nutshells of it, so to speak.
I just think, yeah, it's always a good thing, and when somebody, takes a chance on something that they care about, and creating a business plan isn't easy. I can only imagine the actual brewing process itself, right? As you talked about, it's a science-backed art. So, having to be precise and careful at the start with the brewing process, like all of that, I have no doubt takes an immense amount of work. So the fact that you did that and then started this business, even starting this business during COVID, I can only imagine the challenges that you're facing there.
Well, the biggest challenge I found, I've never brewed beer in my life, ever. Right? I'm just a connoisseur. I'm just a guy that enjoys beer and knows what goes into it and how to make that happen. But I never brewed a batch before last month. I've never brewed any home brew. I've never done anything like that. So it was just on my knowledge of what I wanted in beer, how I wanted it to happen, and created a business moving forward with that, right? So, the science and the operations and the business know-how, I've ran businesses for 15 years, not necessarily the owner, sometimes the owner, sometimes not. But, when you run it, you can, the operations side of the business is easy, right? And the sales side, I've been doing sales for a long time. So that was easy. I just didn't know the ins and the outs of the brewing, and that's been a crash course over the last 6-7 months on what goes into brewing. How does it actually happen? Why do we do certain things? Like, we fill this tube up with sanitizer right now to make sure that when we push stuff from one spot to the other, that things are clean, right? And we don't get any bacteria in there, so it can offset the smells, the tastes, the textures of the beer, right? Little things like that, right? We fill this one up, we don't need to fill that tube up. We add little tiny Irish moss to the brew at this point in time, to prevent it from overboiling, and this and that, right? So it's like the little things within it that I thought you just put the 4 things in, threw it all together in one pot, let it sit there for, boil for an hour and a half, and call her a day, right? But there's so much more involved within that to make sure that product is top quality, and that people enjoy it, right? That there's no green apple taste or meaty taste or all these other chemical compounds that can form within it if it's not done properly in the proper forms, right? So it's been a huge learning curve for someone who's never actually brewed a beer in his life. So
talking about some of the things you learned, going back to the science part of it, I'm fascinated by just kind of the process, because I'm sure it's just a little change or a little modification can make a huge difference in taste. So what are some of the things that you're considering? Like if you're trying to make, say, a more bitter beer versus one that has more floral, or lighter versus darker, like what are some of the keys to brewing these different types of beers and different flavors? So
I've found now over the last little bit, and I'm relatively new to this, the first thing is in your malt bill, so your fermentables. You want to have 3 different types of malt in whatever you're doing, a minimum, right? So if there's one or two, then you get a very, very flat flavor palette, so to speak, right? So the malt gives you the flavor. The hops give you aroma and bitterness within it, and the yeast determines what kind of texture of the beer is going to have. Is kind of the easiest way to kind of explain it, right? So 3 different types of malt minimum with each, whether or not you use 3 different types of barley, whether you use barley, oats, wheat, right? Or whether you use adjunct fermentables, some rice malt, that type of thing, right? So, minimum of 3 there. Usually I want two types of hops, if not 3 types of hops as well, just to make sure that there's some complexity to it, right? And so instead of it being, very one-dimensional beer like you would find in a Bud Lights or, a Canadian Coors, where they're very, very one-dimensional. There isn't a lot of flavor within it, not a lot of texture, not a lot of aroma. They're using very, very minimal ingredients within it. So the bitterness, the earlier you add the hops to your kettle, the more bitter your beer is going to be. The higher, they call it alpha acids. The higher those content in your hops, the more bitter your beer is. The later you add, the less bitter your beer becomes. So, you can use the exact same, hops profile in 2 separate beers. You add the hops profile earlier in your brew, it's more bitter. You add it later, it's way more floral and aromatic. So, those are some pretty easy ways to do that. And your strain of yeast that you use, there's 100 of different types of yeast, whether you use a standard ale yeast, whether you use a saison yeast, a lager yeast, a Kolsch yeast, or even some sour yeast like a lactobacillus or a petrobacillus. So, there's a bunch of different styles of that, and those impart different textures and different textures of your beer. So,
and then the science of the pairings was something that was really interesting. Thinking about how to pair different beers and their flavors with the different cheeses and the meats. That was something that I thought was really cool as well. When you started Edmonton Brewing, did you have any thoughts as to like these beer and cheese nights and pairing up with the different, local food producers, local farms, to kind of combine the two and have these type of tastings? And also, when you were pairing the beers with the cheeses and the meats, what type of considerations go into that?
Okay, so it's our original business plan was to sell to restaurants and pubs, right? All in keg form, but COVID put a hampering on that. Here in Alberta, we're down to 3 or 6 people to a table, and there's a curfew at 10 o'clock, right? The bar's last call is 10 o'clock instead of 2 o'clock like normal. So our ability to sell our beer dropped. So it was kind of a pivot halfway in between. I had originally thought of doing a beer club where I give a 4-pack of beer out to anyone that would join into this beer club each month. And so this beer tastings kind of morphed that beer club into something else, where I take 4 different beers. Right now, due to our capacity, we're partnering up with different other local breweries in town within the craft industry. One of mine and one of 3 other breweries in a 4-pack, combining, right? So the concept around this, it can pivot to us doing 4 unique beers each month and doing a tasting accordingly with the pairings of meat and cheeses. So that's kind of how this all morphed. I'd already been thinking about it before the lodge reached out to me and said, let's do this. But after this, it was a test with you guys to see if it worked, and I think it went off amazingly. So I plan on doing more and more and more of these, because it just the feedback that I got out of it with the information above and beyond just the, here's 4 beers, here's 4 cheeses, here's 4 meats. There was way more involved within the Zoom meeting, I guess. So it turned out really well. In regards to the pairings of the meat and the cheeses to the beers, like for me, I've been eating charcuterie with some my sports team quite regularly. We'd always go out, and there's some of my friends make their own smoked jerky and that type of thing. We'd sit down and have some beers together, and I've always thought, well, there's enough charcuterie out there that tastes differently with each environment, that it wouldn't be that hard to find 4 different types of meat that can fit in with 4 different types of beer. So I went out and found a local small boutique butchery that had some 10 different styles of meat, and we sat together and tried some beer and tried the meat out, and found out which ones fit each other the best. And I went to a local cheesemonger here in town as well, and said, what kind of cheeses you think would work with this stuff? And so we tried 6 or 8 cheeses, and we brought them all together, and it seemed like after extensive research, aka drinking beer and eating cheese and eating meat, we found some pairings.
That's good research. Nothing's wrong with that.
You got to put the time and effort in to make sure that these things work out, right? And if that involves drinking some beer and eating some cheese and meat, I think I'm willing to lay my life down on the line for that, right? So it was fun. It was a good experience, and with from what I've heard from everyone, they thought that the pairings worked really well together. They we whether we did it with textures or flavors or other aspects, right? Aromas that could match across. It seemed like all the pairings seemed to work really, really well together. So the guys from the hall seem to be very, very happy with it.
What I found so interesting about it, and you mentioned it, was how local everything was. You mentioned that the meats, especially, you said they all came from a local business. I think it was 100 kilometers, if I recall correctly. You said everything from. So just
everything was sourced from 100K, yeah.
So it's it's a local brewery, sourcing from farms within 100 kilometers of Edmonton. I think that, especially now, we talk about COVID a lot, and I think every province and every city is really stressing the importance of supporting local businesses right now during lockdowns, during restrictions on being able to go out and eat, whether it be ordering in or virtual events such as the beer and cheese night. I guess just from your perspective, someone who started a business during COVID, just getting support from a Masonic Temple, but also just the importance of supporting local, especially right now when everybody's being hit by restrictions and limitations.
Well, especially with the local craft area in Edmonton, I couldn't do what I'm doing without the help of local craft breweries. So first off, the 3 additional breweries that we had beer for, SYC Brewing or Sick Brewing here in Edmonton, Sea Change Brewing, and Analog Brewing. All 3 of them offered the beer at a discounted rate for us. So for this event. So they gave us all the beer at about 50% for us to work together. The brewers and the brewers in there sat down and we talked, and we sit down and have a beer together and talk about different recipes. So, to keep that creativity together, and out of it, we've got some collaborations happening with 1 or 2 of the breweries. Omen Brewing here in town as well. They, without their canning line, I wouldn't have been able to can the beer to get my beer to get out to this program. So sat there in their back canning beer out of my own off their equipment, right? So this brewing, craft brewery, local brewing market here in Edmonton is so interwoven and tight knit community. Everyone supports everyone else, right? There's enough marketing capacity out there off the big guys, the InBev, the Labatt Group, and the Molson Coors Group, that they've got 80% of the market sewn up, and us other guys are 20%. So the more we stick together and band together, and the more capacity we can take from the big players, the better off everyone is. You get better quality beer, more selection, and everyone lifts everyone else's boats, right? So that's what we're in this area, and just to partner with other local businesses to make sure that they're still successful moving forward, right? Everyone's hit hard, and a lot of these smaller places, like the Italian center that we got our cheese from, they've got 2 locations in Edmonton, but they're really struggling hard, to make sure that things keep going, because people are turning towards Instacart and Walmart and Save-On that are all delivering, and the little guys just don't have the opportunity to do that, right? The Basdar butchery that we got all the meat from this time, they purposely shut down their operations due to COVID, and they're not doing as much production. So the exclusivity goes up and up because they're concerned about stuff. But how else? You need the product in order to sell. So it's tough. Tough figuring out and judging what the market's going to do with in an unknown time frame, I guess, right now.
Absolutely, yeah, and that's not to say, myself, we're just not saying I recognize and understand why the lockdowns or restrictions are in place, and I understand that it's challenging for the government to try to balance these different priorities. But even within a restricted environment, there are ways to support local. Here in Windsor, we have Takeout Tuesdays, where the mayor is encouraging everybody at least once a week, if you can, to support a local restaurant by ordering takeout from them, and if possible, not using one of the apps which take money off, but going right to the source. And we just on today is May 1st, we just opened the farmers market, which is all local products being sold from around here. So it might take the consumer slightly more work to go to a restaurant to pick up takeout as opposed to using Uber Eats or an app like that. But really, for that little bit of work, or even it's a little bit of work to organize a virtual beer and cheese night, but the benefits that the local economy will see, I think, is well worth it, because eventually we're going to come out of this, and when we do, we want as many businesses, small businesses, local businesses, to make it out the other side kind of with us.
Well, specifically towards this this event that I did with the hall or with the temple there, I've already gotten three collaborations out of it. So where we're doing a beer for a restaurant, food truck restaurant and catering business, that's going to be a design for their market. We've got another one where someone wants to run their own line of beer, and another one where a guy wants to contract brew out a specific recipe to his and give it away as a gift for all of his clients, right? So I'm already looking out of this, if everything comes to fruition out of it, I'm looking at $15,000-$20,000 worth of profits, sales, just off of a small 30-person gathering. So and that's minimal right now. So it's really wonderful seeing what these networking events can do for if you've got a small business or not, right? Just being in the same room and explaining what you do and how you do it allows other people to have that creative, hey, we can work together and do something amazing between us both, right? And I think that's another reason why with the Masonic temples, that's a big part of what you guys do as an outsider, right?
Absolutely. I mean, the average at every meeting, the junior warden, Toffin in this case, but at every junior warden, one thing he's supposed to be doing is making sure that there's refreshments either before or after meeting, right? And those refreshments often will come from a local supplier uh, or a local business. So if you're meeting once, most lodges will meet twice a month, once for meeting, once for a degree. So yeah, so that's 2 times a month that you're having food catered in from a local restaurant or from wherever it may be. Um, but yeah, I think the impact that a Masonic lodge or temple can have on the local businesses is something that is sometimes overlooked, but uh, is like you said, it can, a little thing can lead to 15,000-20,000 in profits from these smaller events.
Yeah, I'm very happy, and because of how well it went, I've already got my next one planned, my next beer and cheese planned, which is with a REIT here in town. So they're putting on a tech and a tasting, they call it. So they're going to talk about real estate investment technology changes, and in between, we're gonna have 4 beers, and I'm going to talk to them about what's in the beers and how they match with the cheese, and then it's going to get taken away by other people to talk about technology. So that's the next one, and then after that, maybe we open it up to the general public and say who wants to be a part of this. So,
and I would encourage everybody to work on one of these events in Edmonton, Alberta specifically, or really, I'm sure you could work outside of Edmonton, deliver around to different places. I'd encourage everybody to consider contacting Edmonton Brewing to set up one of these events, because I had a great time, and I know that the lodge members did as well, and it seemed like it was very well organized. It went off very, very well.
There was some hiccups. We were supposed to have a brewery tour, but as I'm doing contract brewing, the place that we had set up with, which is going to be the newest brewery in the Edmonton area at 70 acres, they ran into some hiccups, so they weren't able to allow me into their space to have a sit down and go through a Zoom meeting and show all the equipment and what happens at each stage of the brewing process. But once we've got our own location, doing a brewery tour is would be super simple and easy to do. So
Absolutely, and once those hiccups are solved, that's just another benefit. But the night itself was great, and even without that tour, it was really fun. Without giving away any of your trade secrets, is there what would you say is your most popular recipe, the most popular brew that you have, and are you working on any new types of brews or new products?
So we've got our amber ale, the Klondike Kate Golden Amber Ale that the guys have tried out. It's very difficult to keep it on tap in rotating taps. So someone will order a keg of it, and it's gone in 2-3 days. Very, very, very well received. But we're expecting that our strawberry rhubarb pie beer is going to outsell it by double during the summer. So it tastes exactly like a strawberry rhubarb pie at a local pie shop here in town. So we're going to be naming it after that pie shop as a collaboration. And I had one sip of the beer and then a bite of the pie, and it was the exact same flavor profile and texture, in a glass. So we're expecting once the summer hits that's going to fly off the shelves, and we're not going to be able to keep it on. So that's an exciting one that's coming forward.
That is very cool.
Yeah, right. And this collaboration that we had with one of the other Masons, we're doing a lemon tea saison, which their business, Alberta Barbecue Collective, is a pop-up catering company that focuses on North Carolina barbecue style. and they wanted a beer that tastes like sweet tea that you would find down in North Carolina. So we've created a recipe, and it's in development as we speak right now about with the flavoring. We've got it in fermentation tanks. As soon as we figured it out, we 2 days, 3 days later, we put it in, started a brew on it to figure out what flavor is going to be. But it tastes like sweet lemon tea that you'd find down in the southern United States. So we're excited about that one too.
For those cats like me, like I said, I'm not a drinker. My favorite drink though is a virgin Caesar. But I've heard, what would be your suggestion if I've heard people say, instead of Caesar with vodka, you replace it with beer. Somebody wanted to take that plunge. I'm just curious, what would be the best? What's the best beer to mix into? I think it's called a bloody beer, something like that. What's the best?
Well, there's a couple of different, beer and clams, or a what is it, a red eye, where they just tomato juice. Most people typically when they're mixing in that, they want a light, clean, crisp lager, right? As soon as you start adding tomato juice to something a little bit more heavier, a little bit more full flavored in the malt bill, it just the tomato and the nightshade stuff in there, it creates different chemical compounds in there that are unpleasing, so to speak. So you want the cleanest, crispest, the tasteless beer you can find, and then add the tomato juice into it, type thing. So, go find yourself some Canadian, go find yourself some Bud, go find yourself some Miller, right? Something along those lines, where it's colored water and there's not a lot of flavor to it, and then you add your beer to it, or your tomato juice to the beer. So that's my suggestion. If you want to start adding it to craft, you're probably not necessarily the best idea, but there's lots of craft beer out there where add a slice of lemon, add a slice of citrus, add some a little bit of that here or there, add some peaches or some fruit to it, or other things that change the flavor complexity of it. So
what's your favorite thing to add to a beer, either one of yours or just in general?
My lips. It all depends on the style. So like our lager, I prefer our lager with a slice of lime, or some lime slush on the top to create what's called an iceberg. I enjoy that with our lager. There's some beers that I enjoy with a little squirt of orange juice or lemon. There's a brewery here in town called Brewsters that they've got a raspberry beer where they put actual raspberries floating in the beer, so you can have a bite of a raspberry to get an explosion of the tartness along with the extra flavors. So, like, there's a lot of stuff. Normally, I just leave it blank to see what and trust the brewer's nose and palate to say, hey, this is a good beer, and away I go. If it requires something afterwards, well then it's not necessarily the best beer, but one little squirt of something into it can change it from one flavor to a completely different flavor, and you might love it one way or hate it the other way, right?
So I should mention, here in Windsor, we do have a couple of local breweries, which I'd encourage anybody, really, not just in Windsor, but if you can get them ordered and sent. Walkverville Brewery and Chapter Two Brewing are the two that I know of. And I should say that yourself and Edmonton Lodge inspired me to try a virtual beer tasting here in Windsor with my lodge, which I'm looking forward to doing, with using the cheese bar and some different local breweries, and even a brother who brews his own beer. So it was definitely, like I said, it was an inspiring night, because it's just another thing that I could do to maintain engagement with my lodge. And I think it'd be inspiring to any organization that is struggling to maintain engagement in a virtual settings, which can become monotonous. If it's always the same Zoom meeting over and over again, it can become monotonous. So if any other groups or organizations in Alberta are interested in, a beer, cheese, meat tasting night, or getting in touch with you to see what they can do, I'll leave your contact info in the description to this video, but if you want to shout it out also, so people can know.
So you can either email me at jason@ebmco.ca, so ebmco.ca, or you can just follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Edmonton Brewing, and drop us a direct message there. Get us in our inbox. More than happy to chat about anything that can help you guys out, as well as get a little bit more notoriety for ourselves. Or you just want to sit down and talk about beer and have one. I'm more than open for that too.
And for I don't know how beer travels, in terms of if there's is it do you guys deliver outside of Edmonton? Is it possible to, how far do you deliver out? Does beer keep if you want to get delivered, say, very far away, that type of thing?
So we start running into legislative issues when we get outside of Alberta. I can put it in, send it anywhere in Alberta, no issues, ends, or problems within that, whether we ship it directly, whether it goes through the Liquor Control Board here. If you want a keg of something, by all means, we can ship it down and then get it back through a brewery or through a liquor stores. Perfectly fine to do that. But outside of Alberta, that becomes a little bit more of a difficult situation, because then it's classic bootlegging happening at that point in time, because we're no longer in that situation. But if someone wants to drive into the borders of Alberta and pick it up right at the border, we can work stuff around that. So until we start getting into the other control boards, the liquor control boards in Saskatchewan, Manitoba, Ontario, BC, that type of thing. Until that happens, it's going to be tough to get our product across the board, across here, and down into the States. We're not quite there yet, but there's a possibility.
Well, in fairness, you are talking to a Windsor kid. I guess really I'm a Winnipeg kid, but Windsor for the last 13, 14 years of my life. So if there's ever a city that is theoretically comfortable with bootlegging, it would be Windsor, Ontario, and our history with sending illegal liquor across the Detroit River back in the day, near Walker and all that stuff. We have a very long and proud history of bootlegging in this city.
Yeah, I've been trying to find ways around it legally, and they've sewn up most of the holes within. There's some around that are available, but it's tough. Getting into Saskatchewan, you can get in through Lloyd, right, as a border city. So there's ways around kind of making that happen. But I want to stay above board, right, across it, because the last thing I want to do is have the government say, no, you can't brew beer no more, right, and then that's sort of everything. So in that case, to anybody watching this anywhere in Alberta, contact information is in the description. I can just say again, from experience, it's a great night doing a beer and cheese tasting. It's a great idea for a virtual event, and with provinces, with Alberta being under different restrictive measures, Ontario, it's something to consider, certainly for any organization. Reach out to your local breweries. There's enough craft breweries in every city out there, right? It's kind of been an explosion. So reach out to them and say, hey, we want to use you. We want to put this together, and we want to want to know more about the product, right? We will, with ours, I told everyone about, the entire profile with what's in it, right? And these guys, the brewers are passionate about their beers. So, you go talk to them and say, hey, I want you to tell me all about the beer. I want you to tell me about the beer. I want you to tell me about the marketing, why you named it this, why you did that, right? Give us a lot of information. You can fill 2.5 hours or 3 hours worth of time super easy if someone's passionate about what their product is. So, go talk to them. Every single craft brewer out there will be happy to do something like this.
Absolutely. And yeah, like I mentioned, here in Windsor, we got Walkverville Brewery, we got Chapter Two. If I'm missing any, I apologize. Those are the two of which I'm aware. But yeah, we have a lot of great local products and services, both breweries, cheese bar, a lot of great places to go that can put on events such as this, and where you can get some great products. So with that, thank you so much. I know you're anxious to get your bike back out on the road.
Well, it's 22 degrees above here in Edmonton today, so that's and it hasn't been that high in months.
See, living in Windsor ruined me because I used to know what that means. Because Windsor, right, we're right on the border from Detroit. So now I'm so used to thinking of temperature in the other one, Fahrenheit, Celsius.
Yeah, Fahrenheit's the other one.
There you go. I remember like when I first moved here, I was staying in dorms at university, and I turned on the radio, and they were like, it's 92 degrees or something, and I was like, we're all gonna die. That can't be right. But now when I hear 22, I think we're all gonna freeze to death. Like that can't be.
It's room temperature outside, and in Edmonton, that means it's shorts weather. So, it's nice, right? Even if it gets down to around 0 for you, or 32 for you guys, right? It's it's still warmer than 0 for you, right? So,
absolutely. Yeah, well, I'm from Winnipeg too, so I remember the cold. People from Windsor don't know. People from Windsor say it's cold when it's really not.
Oh. But that said, with the Great Lakes there, that cold, when it does hit you, it gets you right to the bone, right?
We can get wind, but I don't know. Not to let Windsor off the hook, but I do think we don't get it. It's all right. There are places where more like right on the Great Lakes, like Sarnia, Thunder Bay, like those places where they're right on the lake. Like it just
you just get chilled to the bone, right? That wet cold is ugly.
Absolutely. So. Well, thank you so much for your time. Now that all of Windsor hates me for calling them wusses, I'll throw in a plug for anybody watching this, because I never do this. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, comment, give me money on Patreon, all that good stuff. Patreon.com/SquareAndCompass. Anything you want to do there, I appreciate the support. Follow us on Podbean, all that stuff. And yeah, all the content information for Edmonton Brewing is in the description. Move your head to the, I can never do this. Oh, almost a little bit more. Keep going. There we go. That's it. Edmonton Brewing and Malting. That is the logo. Thank you so much for your time. And yeah, I wish you all the best of luck, and hopefully I'll find myself down in Edmonton one day, and I'll get to check out Edmonton Brewing in person.
Sounds great, Ale. First pint's on us.